Welcome. This is Nonprofit 101. I'm trying to put this in presenter mode and also see you guys, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do both. So welcome. This is our, we're at Mission Ready Nonprofit 101. We're getting started a little bit late today. Apologize for the technical difficulties. A couple of logistical things before we get started. We do have plenty of time at the end for questions. So as we go through here, try to save your questions for the end. However, if there's something that you're like, hey, I didn't catch that, can you clarify that real quick? Just pop that in the chat and Kelsey or Solange will catch it and stop me and we'll ask that question and go from there. You will probably have to stop me verbally though, because I can't see myself or anybody else right now in full screen mode. So a little bit about me. I'm a nonprofit management consultant, specializing in board governance and strategic planning. I've been in the nonprofit sector for about 20 years. I've held, everything from intern to chief strategy officer. I've done program management. I've done a lot of grant writing and a lot of work with boards. I did go through the Board Source program to become a certified governance consultant. And I work with nonprofits from all across the spectrum, a lot located here in Central Texas, but I do work with a couple of state and national affiliate organizations as well. So primarily working in the areas of board governance and strategic planning, but have experience, as I said, across the sector. I'm also a board member and I draw a lot of my experience, especially in the board governance space, from that. I was the board president of Family Promise of Bell County for 4 years and still serve on that board. And I'm also on the Temple Education Foundation board currently. So I am very invested and very much an advocate for public education and homelessness awareness and prevention. And you will probably hear those themes echoed throughout my presentation today. Thank you so much to the Rock Rose Foundation for hosting this today. The Rock Rose Foundation and I have partnered on a series of webinars and opportunities to ask questions around nonprofit governance or anything you really want to know in the nonprofit management space. So today we have our Mission Ready Nonprofit 101 webinar. We'll have office hours coming up on 2 separate dates, one in the evening and one at this time, where you can pop on at any time and sort of ask me anything you want to know about governance or nonprofit management. Earlier, just a quick note, earlier when this was sent out with office hours, it was originally scheduled for May 5th. But I goofed on my schedule and we were able to slide to the next day. So it's actually going to take place on May 6th from 11 to 1. And then this June, we will have another webinar kind of building on what we're learning today. And this will be Board Governance Essentials. It's really talking about, okay, once you have a board of directors, this is what they should do. This is what good governance looks like. Here's how you stay compliant. Today's conversation is designed for those who are thinking about starting a nonprofit or who have recently started a nonprofit and need to know where to go with it. We're going to talk about what makes nonprofits such sort of unique animals, what differentiates nonprofits from the for-profit sector. And we're going to look at what it takes to successfully launch and sustain a nonprofit. And spoiler alert, we're not going to get to actually filing for your nonprofit status until way down in the presentation, because there's a lot that needs to be done first. So first, let's talk about what makes nonprofits so unique. Nonprofits are non-governmental entities that operate for a collective, public, or societal benefit. In other words, the work that we do is for the public. That's why it exists. That's what's its purpose. And nobody is profiting personally. There's no private owners who are personally profiting from that nonprofit. Profits are invested back into the organization. As we all know, nonprofits enjoy a very unique tax-exempt status. A lot of times you'll hear 501c3 and nonprofit used interchangeably. As we'll talk about, there are actually multiple different tax classifications within that tax-exempt status, or that would meet the qualifications of being a nonprofit under IRS code. But they do enjoy a unique tax-exempt status. Nonprofits are mission and purpose driven, and we're going to talk a little bit today about the difference between mission and purpose. And they're governed by a volunteer board of directors with authority over the organization. So your board has authority over the organization. And most importantly, nonprofits are businesses too. I say that all the time because I think people are like, oh, it's a business or a nonprofit. No, it's a for-profit or a nonprofit. They're both businesses. They're covered by Texas Business Code. Nonprofits are businesses too, but they operate a little differently. In a nonprofit, your focus is your mission. In a for-profit, you're making money. You're focused on how much money can you make to distribute to your owner, your shareholders, right? In a for-profit, or in a nonprofit, you're reinvesting that income to support your mission and programs. So nonprofits can earn a profit and should earn a profit. It just has to be reinvested in supporting your mission and programs. And that can include everything, from salaries, tangible benefits, all expenses. If it costs an expense to run your nonprofit, then reinvesting in it is an allowable expense. For-profits are really defined by their profit. How successful are they? How much money have they raised? In a nonprofit, you're defined by how well you're serving your purpose, how well you're fulfilling your mission, whether the public and society is benefiting as is required to be a nonprofit under nonprofit law. The other main difference, big difference, and we'll talk about this a lot during this presentation, between a nonprofit and a for-profit is that in the for-profit structure, you have an owner or you have shareholders or both. In a nonprofit, they're governed by a volunteer board of directors, people who are setting the strategic direction of the organization, overseeing the financials, but they don't get paid. It's their job to lead the nonprofit, but they don't get paid. Now they can hire an executive director who does get paid. And many nonprofits, as they grow, do hire an executive director and subsequent staff underneath that executive director. But the leadership is held at the volunteer board of directors. And if you have an executive director, it's a shared leadership structure between the two. The nonprofit sector in the United States is very large. There's over 1.9 million incorporated nonprofits as of 2025. Now that includes very, very small nonprofits and very huge nonprofits like the American Heart Association, and then tiny nonprofits with budgets of 5 or 10,000. So the majority of, and I don't have a slide for this, but the majority of those actually fall into the under 50,000 category. They're very small nonprofits. I think it's more than 50% are very small nonprofits. There are 12.5 million people across the United States who are employed in the nonprofit sector in various capacities, and nonprofits generate $3.7 trillion in revenue. And again, all of that is reinvested for the public benefit. This map is just showing the number of nonprofits for every 10,000 residents. Obviously, because we're such a big state, Texas is showing that we have under 50 nonprofits per 10,000 residents. But we still do have quite a lot of nonprofits, especially in the urban areas. There are various types of charitable organizations. As we talked about, 501c3 is not synonymous with nonprofit. There are other things like fraternal organizations, advocacy and social services, business associations, social and rec clubs, and all of those are tax exempt nonprofit organizations, but they're covered by a different part of the IRS tax law. 501c8, 501c4, C6, etc. The majority of charitable organizations within the United States fall into this 501c3 charitable status, and that includes private and community foundations, although they are governed a little bit differently and have some different rules for each. We're going to be talking today primarily about 501c3s because for the most part, this is the traditional structure. And if you're starting an organization focused on human services, you will more than likely fall under the 501c3 category. So here's what you need to know about 501c3 requirements. Organizations have to exist for a charitable purpose, and these are the defined purposes under IRS tax code. This includes churches, it includes schools, it includes libraries, as well as the more traditional social service nonprofits. They have to exist for a charitable, if you're incorporating as a nonprofit, it exists for a charitable purpose permanently, which means that as long as the organization is in existence, it maintains that charitable purpose. And if the organization is ever to dissolve, the board decides to dissolve the organization, the assets from that organization must be distributed to another nonprofit organization, typically that is mission aligned with your nonprofit. That exists in perpetuity. As a 501c3, there are very strict standards for both your program activities and for governance. And we'll talk quite a bit about what those requirements are in the governance space. You have to maintain revenue from a broad base of support. Essentially, one big benefactor can't be the sole funder of your nonprofit. You have to seek donations, grants, revenue from a broad base of support. Two big things also included in the code is you cannot endorse candidates for public office. If you are endorsing a candidate or opposing a candidate for public office under the umbrella of your nonprofit, you're putting your nonprofit at great risk because this is something that absolutely they cannot do. Now, you can lobby and engage in advocacy activities. Advocacy is a little more broad. It's more like education. You can talk to people about your cause. You can talk to legislators about your cause. You could go, as part of your professional group to the state capitol. Lobbying, where you're actually trying to get something passed, trying to get a bill passed, promoting specific bill, meeting with legislators, you can still do that as a nonprofit, but it has to be limited to 10 to 20% of your organization's activities or the revenue you bring in. So you're existing for a charitable purpose, you have some strict standards, you're bringing in income, and you have some limitations as far as what you can do in the policy, advocacy, and legislative space. So when I say that the IRS has strict standards for governance, what I mean is the system of policies, processes, and oversight mechanisms led by a board of directors that ensures the nonprofit is fulfilling its mission, acting ethically, and remaining sustainable. You're legally compliant, you're morally compliant, you're aligned with your mission, you're doing what you say you're going to do, and you're making sure that you can do this for a long time. You have the processes in place, the systems in place, the right people in place, the governance structures in place, that you're going to be able to do this for a long time. The board of directors, as I mentioned, has the highest authority within a nonprofit organization. They're elected to guide and oversee the organization's work. Typically, it's self replicating. So you have your board is going to bring on new board members. They're going to elect officers. Eventually those people will roll off. So you're constantly building your board, but the board itself is a constant. So you're bringing those people in place. They have the authority for setting strategic direction, for fundraising for the organization, and providing legal and financial oversight for the organization. So that's your fiduciary responsibility, is what that's called. Providing legal and financial oversight, as well as ethical oversight, making sure you're adhering to bylaws and policies that govern the organization. The board of directors in a staffed organization hires, supports, and evaluates the organization's chief executive. So not all organizations will have a chief executive or an executive director. I use those terms interchangeably just to mean the highest ranking paid staff person. But should you go that route as you grow, it is the board who is responsible for finding that chief executive, hiring them, supporting them, evaluating them. They are the boss. You're establishing your policies as a board of directors, have responsibility for establishing the bylaws for the organization and revising, amending the bylaws as needed. Establishing strong policies, conflict of interest, whistleblower policy, procedures, and structures. So that may be committees, it might be membership that govern the organization. And in staffed organization, boards are governing boards. This is what they do. But in unstaffed organizations and all volunteer organizations, board members do also have responsibility for day-to-day operations. So we usually use the distinction governing board, working board, and sort of a hybrid. I can tell you right now, I'm on very much a governing board where we have a strong executive director, and another board that's more of a hybrid board because we have a part-time executive director and a very part-time staff person. So board members still have to do a lot of the work themselves. And that's going to vary from organization to organization. But the key takeaway here is that the board of directors have the highest authority in a nonprofit organization. They are the boss. So if you're a founder or prospective founder, you may be saying, wait, I'm not the boss? No, the board is the boss. And here's why. A fundamental aspect of a nonprofit is that there are no owners. And this is spelled out in IRS code. But when you structure your organization as a nonprofit, it's no longer yours. It belongs to the mission. And the board is the steward of that mission. You're putting that mission out into the world. It's a public or societal benefit, and you're bringing on board members who are going to help steward that mission. But it doesn't belong to you. It doesn't belong to anyone. It just belongs to the mission. And that's very, very different in the nonprofit sector than the for-profit sector. And I think one of the hardest things that for most founders to wrap their head around it, hey, like, this is my baby. I came up with this idea. I really want to see it through. You can absolutely see it through. Bring on the right people to help you do that. But the organization has no owners. So if understanding all of that, you're not scared away yet, and you want to start a nonprofit, that's great. There are a lot of amazing nonprofits existent, and many of those 1.9 million nonprofits in the US are doing great, great things in their communities. And so we need nonprofits. We need nonprofits in our area to fill the gaps in what the for-profit sector can do and what the government sector can do. But we do want to be prepared that it is a heavy lift. And the first thing you do isn't filing your paperwork. First, before you even get to the process of setting up the nonprofit, you need to do a few things. But just so you know, I'm ready to go. You want to clarify your purpose. You want to look at your ecosystem or your market. You want to look at alternatives to starting a nonprofit. If you have a vision or a mission, you have something you want to see achieved, a cause that you care about, you don't necessarily have to start a nonprofit. There may be other ways to plug in and scratch that itch, so to say. And you want to assess your readiness to start a nonprofit. Key questions you want to ask yourself. First, clarify your purpose. You want to ask yourself, what is the problem you're trying to solve and why is it important? So make your problem statement and make it as specific as possible. The problem can't be there's hunger in our community. The problem might be, 32% of families with children are food insecure, right? So being as specific as you can is going to help you work toward your proposed approach. You want to define your target service population, which again, can't be everybody. You want to hone in on who exactly you're trying to serve, because again, that's going to help you with your proposed approach. It's going to help you with how you market. It's going to help you with the type of board members who you recruit. You need to kind of hone in on exactly who you're serving. Is it youth? Is it youth 8 to 18? Is it youth in foster care? Like who specifically? And then what is your proposed approach and what makes that approach unique and impactful? There may be other organizations doing similar work in your community. What makes you feel that what you are proposing is different from what others are doing and has a better chance of making an impact toward the problem that you're trying to solve? Next, you want to assess the ecosystem. And what I mean by that is do your research. There are a number of organizations operating in your community that are doing similar work or that exist for the same purpose. And rather than duplicating something that's already been done, you want to identify where there are gaps in that system that need to be filled. So the gaps might be a service that doesn't exist, or it might be that the existing system doesn't have the capacity to address the full need. So for example, say there are 3 organizations serving children in foster care in the area. And I think there are probably more. I know there are at least 3 in Bell County working with foster families. But maybe there's a gap in children who have aged out of the foster care system and providing some services for them, right? So in that case, that would be an actual gap in the services available at all through the system. Alternatively, maybe there's, you're working with a homeless services organization and there are multiple shelters that exist, but there's not enough shelters to house the entirety of the homeless population in Bell County. And I can use that example very knowledgeably because we have a wait list a mile long at Family Promise of Bell County. And I know a lot of the other organizations do as well. So you want to look, you want to see who's already doing what they're doing, how they're doing it. Maybe they could be potential partners. And you want to research your alternatives. So if you look and you're looking at that whole ecosystem web and you don't see any obvious gaps, maybe you just want to volunteer for a similar nonprofit and be able to contribute to their mission. One alternative is developing a program under the umbrella of an existing nonprofit, and this is called fiscal sponsorship. So essentially, you're taking your idea, you're asking another nonprofit, hey, do you want to be the sponsor of my idea? Can I partner with you? You have an existing nonprofit. You already have your 501c3. They would help operate your program under their umbrella. They do the reporting for you. Their board of directors would approve things related to your program. You would not have to set up your own board of directors or any of the other red tape involved in IRS law, 501c3 law. You could do something like an unincorporated association. You can launch an initiative with a group of volunteers. You know, if you're something like neighborhood beautification or cleanup, something that can be done without actually needing to start a nonprofit. And a lot of times the best options for that is if it's something that has very, very low overhead, that's not going to cost a lot of money, that's something that you can really do with volunteer power, volunteer labor. So if you want to organize something like, hey, we're lawn angels and we're going to go mow the lawns of elderly people who are aging in place and who can't mow their own lawns, right? So that would be a good example of an unincorporated association. Other ways to give back: provide financial support for serving your cause. And in some cases, maybe you have an idea that could generate a social enterprise where you're giving back to a cause you care about, but you're still owning a for-profit operation. You're bringing in a profit, and maybe that appeals more to your entrepreneurial spirit. So finally, right, you've clarified your purpose, you've assessed your ecosystem, you've thought about, hey, is there something else I can do besides start a nonprofit? Maybe you feel like, hey, I've got it. I know what I want to do. I know how to do it. I'm ready. Ask yourself a few more questions. What exactly is your nonprofit going to do? And how are you going to approach your purpose? Do you have a succinct mission and elevator pitch? And I'm not saying that you have to have your mission down packed, the one that you're going to use forever, or that you have to have some written elevator pitch. What I mean is, can you speak articulately about what it is you want to do in a way that somebody would understand it in 30 to 45 seconds? You know, if you're talking to somebody at a party, are you going to have to spend a lot of time unpacking what you want to do? Or is it something you're like, yep, I know it. There's a problem, and here's what I'm going to do about it. What will it cost to operate your nonprofit? Because even if you don't have a tremendous amount of overhead, even if you're not bringing on staff at the get-go, you're probably going to need supplies, equipment. You may need to rent space. And think about not only what it's going to cost out of pocket financially, but what in-kind support might you need? Because if it's something that's going to cost without having that donated, you need to consider that part of, your budget. So once you decide, okay, I have a good idea of how much it's going to cost, I know what I want to do and what the costs associated with that are, you need to be sure that you are going to be able to secure funding for your nonprofit. And I hear a lot from early stage nonprofits like, oh, I thought maybe we would write a grant. I know so-and-so got a grant. This organization got a grant. We're very blessed in Central Texas now to have the Rock Rose Foundation, who are willing to take a risk on new nonprofits, but most are not. Most foundations are not. You have to establish yourself as a nonprofit. You're going to need seed money. You're going to need community connections. You're going to need a small but reliable base of individual donors who are going to give to your nonprofit. So you know how much it's going to cost. You need to feel pretty confident that you're going to be able to fund your nonprofit. And then importantly, who's going to lead your nonprofit? If you're founding the nonprofit, is it going to be you? Do you eventually, do you want to be the leader? Are you seeing this through? Do you have the business acumen to run a nonprofit? Maybe you want to bring in a colleague or somebody else that has this entrepreneurial mindset and a business acumen, and that can help you build that. But think about how it's going to happen, how you're going to get this nonprofit off the ground. And then lastly, do you have a network? of skilled and connected individuals who could serve as your founding board of directors, because the founding board of directors is going to be critical in setting up the governance practices, the organizational structures, the initial partnerships, all the pieces that are going to position that organization for success. So if you don't have a good group of folks you can rely on, it is going to make it a little bit harder to start to launch and sustain that nonprofit. So once you've asked yourself all those questions, if you're feeling pretty confident, you feel like, I have most of the skill sets, I know what I'm doing, I went to this training by Lavin Strategies, and so now I know how to start a nonprofit. These are the steps you're going to take in the process of launching your nonprofit. And you can see that we don't get to incorporate and obtain your tax exempt status until number 6 on the list. There's a lot of steps we have to take before then. The first is going to be developing your mission and vision statements. So I just want to focus quickly on the difference between mission and purpose. Your organization's purpose is the reason it exists, and its mission is the unique approach to a common purpose, right? So there may be multiple homeless service organizations in a community, and their unique approach to ending homelessness or serving homeless families might be different. There might be multiple organizations whose purpose is ending food insecurity, and their approaches are all going to be different. So your mission is unique to you. Your purpose is probably common, is probably held by another organization as well. And part of the process of being mission-centered is also always continuing to refer back to the purpose, the reason why we exist, and not just, hey, this is a statement that we put together about how we do the things that we do, because we exist for a reason. We exist because there are homeless families. We exist because there's food insecurity. We exist because there's a lack of youth literacy, graduation rates, etc. There's a reason. You want to develop your mission, vision, and values statements. Starting with the vision, your vision is your big picture of what you want to achieve. So it can be very lofty, like no child in the county is going to be hungry. This is the future that we want. It's describing a future state in which your goals have been accomplished. Your mission, on the other hand, is describing your purpose, your motivations, and your actions to reach that goal. So you're going to have your who, your what, your how, your why. It's going to be a succinct statement talking about your approach. Your value statements, which we won't go into too much in this webinar, but which I talk about in my strategic planning webinar, if anybody had the opportunity to attend that one last year, are the ethical guidelines and standards that direct all of your action. And those guide both your organization and individual behaviors. This is how we as an organization want to present ourselves, with integrity, with inclusion, with dignity. These are the things that are important to us. So when you build your mission statement, and again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the mission statement that you're going to use for the rest of your organization's existence, but you have to have a mission statement to be able to file your tax paperwork. So you may be, as a founder, writing this mission statement yourself. And then later, when you have a full board of directors, you may go through, some strategy sessions to further hone and refine and craft that mission. But here's the basics. Whom does the organization serve? Why do you exist? What does the organization do? Meaning, what service and programs do you offer? And what strategies do we use to achieve our purpose? What's our approach and what makes it unique? So here are some examples from the American Red Cross, Susan G. Komen, and the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. They cover the basics. You may not all hit the who, why, they may not all hit all four, right? But it's going to be clear how they fulfill their purpose through the mission statement. So the Red Cross prevents and alleviates human suffering in the face of emergencies. That's what they do by mobilizing the power of volunteers and generosity of donors. That's how they do it, volunteers and donors. Susan G. Komen, they have a mission. What do? They save lives. How? By meeting critical needs in our communities and investing in breakthrough research. Why? To prevent and cure breast cancer. So that one has pretty much everything. Boys and Girls Clubs of America. This is actually one of my favorite missions, just because they don't feel the need to specify, underserved or low income or whatever, to enable all young people, especially those who need us most, to reach their full potential as productive, caring, and responsible citizens. So you get the feel looking at all of these, and granted, these are all known organizations. Maybe I could use some from organizations you don't know, but I think you have a feel for what they do and how they do it. Here's one from an organization you may not know. This is Transformation Waco, an organization I recently worked with in Waco on a strategic plan, and their board came up with some new vision and mission statements. So their vision was a community where families, educators, and partners work together. And the big vision statement is ensuring every learner thrives academically and beyond. This is an organization that provides out of school time programming, after school care, early childhood programming, and is now operating this beautiful facility, the STEAM Center on the Brazos River. It's a former city rec center that they've converted into a STEAM center, and it has all kinds of really cool programs for people of all ages, run by Transformation Waco in partnership with the city of Waco. So their mission statement was, we expand opportunities for students and families by cultivating innovative and safe spaces for learning, like their partnerships with the Housing Authority and the community centers there, and as I mentioned, the STEAM Center. So I'll tell you, Transformation Waco, granted, we went through a small group exercise, but they came up with this mission statement in about an hour. And it's very different than their previous mission statement. They've been around for about 7 years. So this was not their founding mission statement. This was a revision. So it can be done. It can be done in an hour, but you want to have your initial mission statement. Organizational structure. So first, you want to start your mission statement. You want to decide what your organizational structure will look like. And there are some options. The typical organizational structure, and what you'll see in most organizations here, is a board-only structure, which basically means, as I said, the board's self-electing, they're self-perpetuating, they have full control of governance. It's a group of people who are voting on key decisions. And this is the model that most traditional nonprofits use. The other model is a membership model. This is really kind of a representative democracy model in which members elect the board or the executive committee, who can then vote on their behalf for day-to-day things, routine things, but individuals are still voting for key decisions. They're voting to elect the board of directors, and they're voting typically for approval of the operating budget. They probably have to, I think they also have to vote to approve bylaws. That might depend organization to organization, but if you have a membership organization, membership must be defined in the bylaws. What constitutes a member? What are their qualifications? What do they do? What do they have authority for? That all has to be accounted for in the bylaws. You see this primarily with clubs, fraternal organizations, PTOs, PTAs, churches. The pro of this is obviously it's very democratic. There's transparency, but as we know from our political elections, that can lead to a lot of gridlock. It can lead to fighting. There could be politicized elections and meetings because it is hard to get a much larger group of people to agree on something. And they all have their own agendas. With a board-only board, the pro is that it simplifies decision-making, right? There's fewer people involved in that decision-making process. You don't usually have that election conflict because your board is, again, self-sustaining. They're electing their replacements. The con is that with a smaller board, you don't have as much external accountability. So you really want to make sure that when you have that board-only, more closed governance system, that you are being as transparent and accountable as possible and avoiding all conflicts of interest. And we'll talk about that a little bit in just a minute. One thing I do want to mention while we're on membership, though, is the difference between governing members and affiliate members. Sometimes organizations will use the term membership, and those members don't have voting authority. They're just, maybe they're donors that they choose to call members in like a tiered structure, or you're supporting the arts and you're our members and we invite you to an annual event, whatever that looks like. Governing members, voting members, as I said, are more in these fraternal organizations, churches, PTOs, etc. And that membership has to be defined in the bylaws. Affiliate members, non-voting members do not. So again, with organizational structure, this is an example of what an organizational structure could look like in a staffed model. The board of directors hires an executive director. The executive director is overseeing several director level staff. Those staff maybe have people who report to them. And then maybe there's an administrative assistant. And this could be a much smaller scale. It could be the executive director and 2 staff people. It could be an org chart that looks like the board of directors, an executive director, an admin assistant, and that's it. Like all these things are to the side or gone. There are all different structures for staffed organizations. For unstaffed organizations, you just have your board of directors and potentially members and your volunteers, obviously. But the board of directors is always at the top of the org chart, and they're always responsible for hiring an executive director. Now, once an executive director is hired, the board does not have authority over any of the other staff, only the executive director. The executive director then serves as usually the primary visible leader of the organization and is hiring the rest of the staff, supporting them, providing their evaluations, just as the board does for the ED. Okay, so this is one we may need to spend a little bit of time on. The role of the founder. As I mentioned, the founder is not the owner, right? The mission belongs, they create the mission belongs to the organization, the board is the steward of that mission. So what does that mean for the founder? There are a couple of different roles. Option 1 is on the board. You may have the founder as the board president, or maybe the board, maybe the founder, once you've recruited a number of people for your board, maybe you're like, I don't need to be the board president. I want to have a say in what happens next, but we've recruited other people. We've elected a board president. If the founder remains on the board, he or she maintains voting privileges in the organization. They are a volunteer within the organization, and they maintain those voting privileges on the board, and as such are subject to all of the governing laws that govern everything in your bylaws about what the board does, as well as how long those board members can serve, because you do want to have a definition of term limits in your bylaws. Option 2 is that your founder serves as your chief executive or your executive director. This is the primary staff in either a paid or an unpaid capacity. The key is that in order to serve as an organization's executive director, this individual must be voted into the position by the board of directors. So it's the board's job to hire the executive director, whether or not that executive director is unpaid, is paid or not, right? You, as a staff member, you have no voting privileges. So I have heard organization leaders say, I'm the chair and the executive director. You cannot be both. You can only be one or the other. The board chair or the board president has voting privileges and is a member of the board. The chief executive or the executive director reports to the board of directors and does not have voting privileges. They are hired by them. In a staffed organization, as I mentioned, the chief executive is going to manage operations. They're going to hire staff as needed. So the reason I have this here is when you go into this whole process, right, of setting up your organization before you recruit a board of directors, before you go through the process of business planning, if you are a founder, you need to have a good idea of whether you see yourself continuing to be involved in this volunteer capacity and want to eventually hire somebody else who's the subject matter expert to lead the organization, or if you yourself really want to grow into that executive director or chief executive position. And if that's the case, that might impact the way you build your board, because you want to build a board who is really going, regardless of whether you're the board president or you have vision of being the chief executive, you want to build a board that's going to support you, that believes in your idea, that respects you as a person, right? Who's going to let you continue to lead as a founder, but within the structure that exists. I'm sure there will be more questions about that later. And as I said, we will leave plenty of time at the end for questions. So you've now done your homework. You've built your mission statement. You've figured out where you want to be. You've determined your organizational structure. Now you need to kind of lay it all out. You want to look at, okay, where have I been? Where am I going? I've got my mission. I've got my vision. What are the programs for my organization going to look like? That approach that we talked about, how are we going to implement that? What makes that unique? Write it out. How are you going to describe your programs and services? Your organizational structure and your staffing plan. Again, do you want to have staff right off the bat? Maybe you have some seed money that allows you to hire somebody right off the bat, right? Or a consultant right off the bat. Maybe you don't, and you really need to bring in some strong board members and eventually hire a staff person. That's the importance also of knowing where you want to be, your role as a founder. You want to include in your business plan, your marketing and outreach strategy. How are you going to let people know about your organization, that it exists, what programs and services it has? Who are you going to partner with? You've already gone through the process of doing that ecosystem mapping exercise and finding organizations in your area that may have a similar mission or similar programs, and aligning yourself with them. So how are we going to partner with them? How are we going to let people know? A fundraising plan. This does not have to be, huge and drawn out, but you need to have a basic understanding of where your initial money is coming from and how you think you're going to be able to get there. We'll talk about fundraising a little bit later in the presentation, but really focusing on individual donors is typically where you want to start. You want to at least have a very, very basic budget. and financial projections. If you're going through the process of writing your programs and your services, kind of understanding your staffing plan, how you're going to bring in money. Okay, what do I think we need money for in the first year to effectively deliver these programs that we're building now? And then you want to determine how you're going to measure impact. Is it in number of families served? Is it in maybe you're doing some surveys or something? Maybe it's literacy and you're wanting to improve literacy over time and you need to be able to show that impact. So how are you going to show your impact? Because your funders want to know that, your donors want to know that, the community wants to know that. And in order for your organization to sustain, you have to have impact and be able to measure it. Okay, so you've probably already at this point figured out some thoughts about what you want to name your nonprofit. Maybe that's even where you started, right? I have this great name and it aligns with this idea. As you think about what you want to name your nonprofit, it needs to be unique in Texas. Other nonprofits in other states can have this name, but it needs to be unique in Texas. It has to include corporation, incorporated, company, or some abbreviation. And your name should really feel aligned with the mission. So if you go to the Texas Secretary of State, you can type in the business entity search, you can check name availability. My husband actually just incorporated his private practice and went through this process of checking in all the business name availability. So I've seen this in practice. But it really, whatever you come up with should feel aligned with the mission. You should have an understanding of, it doesn't necessarily have to communicate the same thing as the mission statement does, but you should have an understanding of the fact that it is a nonprofit organization and what that nonprofit organization might do. Okay, so after you've gone through that, one thing you want to do before we start talking about recruiting our board of directors is understanding conflicts of interest and preparing for those. So conflicts of interest occur when a board member's personal interest could compromise their judgment with regard to the nonprofit. And that could be financial or otherwise. Maybe you're connected with another nonprofit that or with a company that is aligned. It does not have to be financial. You can get benefits in other ways. Maybe it's visibility benefits, whatever. But even the appearance of a conflict of interest is going to harm public trust. So a couple of examples: hiring a friend or family member of a board member as your executive director. A board member voting on a contract with a company that's owned by a family member. There is a clause in 501c3 tax code called private annulment. And the IRS defines this as the organization must not be organized or operated for the benefit of private interests. Because remember, it's only for public or societal benefit. And no part of a Section 501c3 organization's net earnings may inure to the benefit of any private shareholder or individual. Basically, you can't financially profit. You can earn a salary if you're the executive director, right? Your staff can be paid, but you personally, as a board member, cannot financially benefit from being a board member of the nonprofit. That's seen as a conflict of interest. To avoid those conflicts, you want to right off the bat develop strong policies, have a strong conflict of interest policy that covers all personal interests, not just the financial ones. You want to require disclosure of any potential interests or conflicts, real or perceived, before a decision is made. So a couple of ways you can do that within the board meeting. If you know that you're about to discuss something, you can say, hey, we're voting on a a contract, or we're voting to engage with this consultant, or whatever it is, whatever financial transaction you're about to make, does anybody have a conflict of interest that we should know about before we vote on this? You can also require, even within your conflict of interest policy, you might ask board members to, in advance, disclose any potential conflicts of interest. So just, I have an equity stake in this, or I am also on this board of directors, or, my spouse is involved with this, right? So any potential conflicts, just so you know, those are out there. Interested board members, meaning the person to whom the conflict of interest applies, should recuse themselves from discussion and voting if it's anything that could potentially benefit them. And you need to ensure that your meeting minutes reflect those disclosed conflicts of interest, and that the interested board member abstained from that vote. So they didn't vote on it, they've recused themselves, your minutes need to reflect that. So that's not to say that an organization can't engage in a contract that could potentially, to which, with, say, a board member, in the case of a board member's family, right? Maybe they have a construction company and they're building a new facility, and a board member's family owns a construction company. The board member's not directly benefiting from it. They don't have any stake in that. They are connected, but they didn't vote on it. They didn't vote on it or discuss it, and you've captured that in the meeting notes. That is sufficient for conflict of interest. You also, in that case, would want to make sure that you're getting bids from multiple construction companies, and that the construction company of the family member of your board member was the lowest bid. So then you're covering, all of your bases and avoiding any, again, perceived conflict of interest. And I say all that to get to this: family members serving on boards. This is allowed under 501c3 law, but it's generally discouraged. The state of Texas doesn't say anything about it. State of Texas doesn't care as long as you have 3 board members. That's literally all they care about. The IRS requires at least 51% of your voting members of the board to be unrelated, and you have to be able to have a quorum or a majority of your board present be unrelated. So that, again, back to that private inurement, this rule is designed to prevent that. So from the IRS standpoint, it looks fishy if you have too many family members on your board. But beyond compliance, there are reasons not to have too many family members serving on your board. It could really lead to more insular decision-making. You all have, similar background, may have similar perspective. You may have the same networks. So you're not bringing in that diversity of perspective, and you may be limiting your board's effectiveness that way. Now, that said, understanding that founding organizations are going to have kind of a limited resources, right? Limited number of people you can tap. You have to rely on people serving in volunteer positions who have other obligations, who already know your mission, who have a passion for your mission. So I think when you start up, you can temporarily have family members on your board, provided it's less than 49%, and that you have plans to transition to a more diverse board within the next year or two. And if your family members serve, they should be recruited for a purpose. They have a particular skill set, legal, accounting, management, something that is going to help your board be successful. So bottom line, you can do it with caution, try to keep it temporary, and have a plan for recruiting board members who are not related to you. So what does it mean to have a well-functioning board? This is what you're going to focus on as you recruit for your first board. A well-functioning board is mission-focused, diverse, and representative of multiple backgrounds, experiences, perspectives, and comprised of individuals that have relevant skills, knowledge, and connections. They know who's who in the community. They can connect your mission to the right partners, or they bring certain skills. Again, accounting, marketing, fundraising. They reliably give of their time, talent, and treasure, what I call the 3 T's, meaning they show up. They're willing to work. They're going to put in their time for you, and time is very valuable. They're willing to give of their talent, their skills, the unique things that they bring to the organization. And as a well-functioning board, you're going to employ best practices in governance. Oh, I forgot the treasure. They're willing to fundraise and give of their own money to the organization as well. So they're giving their time, they're showing up, they're putting their talents to work, and they're fundraising for the organization. So before you recruit, you want to create a board member job description and establish expectations. And the reason for that is when you're meeting with prospective board members, especially if you're a founding board, you need to be really upfront. This is going to be the case regardless of whether you're a founding board or whether you're an established organization. Being upfront with the board members you want to bring on about exactly what is expected of them is going to help them, A, to make an informed decision about whether they want to join your board, and B, they're going to know coming in what is expected of them and hopefully be willing to rise to the occasion. So, you're telling them how often they need to, when we meet, what we do, what the board member roles are, letting them know, like, we think that, we want to meet on these days. We want you to give financially. Let them know what you want from them, what you expect from them. Establish terms for your founding board. So best practice in governance, and again, we'll cover this in June because we're going to have a whole session on board governance, on organizational governance, but it's best practice to have terms for your board. You do have to specify the terms in your bylaws and to have the best practice is to have term limits, right? So for example, you might say, oh, when you come onto the board, your first term is 3 years, you can serve another 3-year term, and then you have to roll off the board. So 2 3-year terms. Your term is 3 years, your term limits are 2 terms. Now, when you have a founding board, it's a little more complicated because you're bringing on these people that have mission passion, they're helping you build it, but you want to make sure that you also have that diversity of perspective. You want to have some turnover. So you want to establish what your terms are for your founding board. A lot of times what organizations will do is say that a certain number of people, a third are serving a 1-year term, a third are serving a 2-year term, a third are serving a 3-year term. And the reason why is you don't want everybody rolling off your board at the same time. So know what you want, know what you're expecting. And that way, when you go and talk to those prospective board members, you're saying, hey, you're committing for a year. You're committing for 3 years, hopefully, right? Like you can resign at any point, but we're hoping you'll commit for at least 3 years. And you want to draft your bylaws. And we'll talk a little bit about bylaws in a minute. So here are some expectations for your all volunteer board. This is what you can say as you're going out and meeting with prospective board members. Mission and strategy. You want them to commit to promoting the mission and programs. You expect them to have good governance. We want you to prepare for all board meetings, attend them, and serve on at least one committee, if you have committees. And again, we'll talk about this in the board governance, but committees are a very effective way for especially new organizations and all volunteer organizations to get the work done. Operational support. So you're letting them know, hey, this is a working board, right? We don't have staff. We really need individuals who are going to support operations based on their skill set. If you can help with some of this administrative stuff, if you can help plan events, if you're good at marketing, if you're good at, managing finances and budgets, maybe you can serve as our treasurer. So letting them know that, hey, this is a working board, you are going to need to do some operational work. You want to let them know that they're a fiduciary of the organization, meaning they have to monitor finances, approve and adhere to the budget, and ensure legal compliance. And very important, you want to ask and let them know that, hey, there's the expectation that as a member of our board of directors, you're going to help fundraise for the organization in whatever way is most aligned with your skills and your level of comfort. So you're identifying prospects, maybe you're making introductions, you're serving as an ambassador for the organization everywhere you go, and you're making a personally meaningful financial contribution. 100% board giving. You would, here, before we get to bylaws, the other thing, you don't just want to verbally communicate these expectations. You want to have a board member agreement that just outlines what the expectations are. And when you bring new board members on, have them sign that saying, yes, I'm committed. I like to have those board member agreements updated every single year. So when it gets to the end of the fiscal year, you're starting the new fiscal year, you're installing new officers, also have everybody say, okay, this is the time that we are going to sign our board agreements for the year and keep those on file. All right. So you have to write your bylaws. What do you want to include? I see a lot of bylaws that founding nonprofits have pulled templates online, and they're so specific and so legal. Keep it as simple as possible while still allowing your organization strong guidance around how to govern. If you try to be a little too rigid, you're going to bog yourself down. Don't include a lot of language that isn't necessary. Let's stick with the basics. So in the bylaws, you have to designate your name, your location, your purpose. We operate in this county and we are an education organization. It can be very basic. You have to have your board structure. So that's, your number of directors, what qualifications, if any, your board has, what their terms and term limits are, who you have to include your officers within that. What are their titles? What are their responsibilities? How are they selected? Are they elected annually? Is there, how are you going to ensure that you're electing officers, and what do they do? Sorry, I got a little hung up there. Meetings, you also, within your bylaws, have to look at the frequency of your meetings. Define, we're going to meet at least annually. Again, if you say we're going to meet at this place at this time, you're kind of limiting yourself a little bit. A lot of times it'll say like the board may meet at least once a year at a place and time to be established by the board of directors, right? Like it's very, very broad, but you do need to include notice requirements. So you need some things around governing the meetings, what constitutes a quorum, when is that majority, when do you need 2/3 votes for certain things, when do you need to give 5 days written notice for a meeting, remove any language about faxing. Like so many bylaws I see is like by email, by fax. Written notice is fine. You don't have to specify anything beyond written notice. You have to talk about your voting and decision making. How are votes cast? Are you going to allow proxy voting? You have to define the removal process for board members and officers. And within your bylaws, you want to make clear how the board can amend the bylaws and make list of any amendments that have been done previously. It was amended on this date, on this date, on this date. And you want to include a dissolution clause, which is the instructions for distributing your assets if your organization ever were to dissolve. That has to be clear, and that is one of the primary requirements of the IRS. So what not to include, as I said, specific times and dates of meetings, really detailed operational policies, HR policies, document retention and destruction. Create separate policies for those. Otherwise, your bylaws are going to get really bogged down. And anytime you change a policy, you have to go through a bylaw amendment process. You want to avoid overly complex rules and unnecessary legal language. So keep it as simple as possible. And you want to avoid naming a specific number of directors or specific positions. Like we have somebody who serves as our marketing director. I'll see sometimes organizations, all volunteer organizations, using staff-like terms to describe board members. You can have board members who are responsible for different things, but don't put those as positions in your bylaws. Or say we're going to have 7 directors, right? Because then if you want to expand or if you lose a director, right, then you have to take action right away. You either have to amend those bylaws, or if you have a director who rolls off, replace that person right away. So you have exactly that many directors. I like to use a range, no less, it might be like no less than 6 and no more than 15, just depending on the size of your organization. Nationwide, the average size of a board is 15, but that includes both very large and very small organizations of all budgets. I mean, that's the average. So the right size of your board is the size that you need to get the work done. But keep it as a range. Don't be specific. So as you're building your board, the key skills and experiences you want to look for that are really going to help you, especially in that all volunteer capacity when you need people to roll up their sleeves and get to work: marketing and communications, resource development or fundraising, people with a financial background, whether that's in banking or accounting. If you can get a CPA on your board, great. And if they'll do your books, amazing. But you do at least want to have somebody who is going to be able to prepare financial statements. If you can find somebody with legal experience, an attorney, that's great. They can review your bylaws, make sure that you're doing everything above board. They're really good fiduciaries. One thing that a lot of people forget about is nonprofit management. If you can find somebody who has successfully led another nonprofit, that has a good budget, that has strong outreach and impact, and they're willing to help you with your mission, great. They're not only going to be able to help you with mission fulfillment, but they're going to be able to do all the back end stuff, right? They know governance. So having somebody with nonprofit management experience. A subject matter expert. So I say that's lived or learned experience. It's great to have lived experience on your board, meaning somebody that has been a part of the problem that your organization exists to solve. At the Family Promise Board of Directors, we have a director that actually went through our program and stayed in the shelter with her daughter. And she has that lived experience of having been without a home for a brief period of time. And she can bring that to the board of directors. Learned experience, not quite as good as lived experience, but obviously a subject matter expert. If you are building an organization that is addressing food insecurity, and the director of the local food pantry wants to serve on your board, and they've served in that capacity for 20 years, they're a subject matter expert, and you clearly want to bring them onto your board. And also human resources, particularly as you think about growing, bringing on staff, building policies, building your HR handbook, having somebody with HR experience is helpful. You want to look at board members, prospective board members' community connections as well. So who do they know? What are they connected to? Are they a small business owner? Do they have connections to the small business community? Do they work for a large bank or corporation? Those large corporations may have money to give, may support your organization. Do they have connections to the faith-based community and churches that may be a source of donors and volunteers, to the education community, maybe to, financial support, to foundations or philanthropy, to other community nonprofits with whom your organization could partner? And do they have political capital? Are they involved in government? Thinking about when you bring people on, not only their skills, but who are they connected to? What circles can they get you in? So where and how to find those board members? Volunteers. Maybe there's similar organizations. Maybe there's staff and board who might want to serve on yours. Small business owners through the Chamber of Commerce. Colleagues, acquaintances of your current board members. If you have a founding board, maybe you don't have those current board members yet, but colleagues and acquaintances of your network, local leadership programs, local colleges and universities, and you can even post your board positions publicly. Once you have your board member job description and you're posting, you can put it on your website, on Facebook, LinkedIn, job boards. There's all kinds of options for getting the word out publicly. Sometimes you'll bring in people that you have no idea, you wouldn't know at all otherwise. But the point is you want to get beyond your network. We've talked about having family members serve on boards. It's kind of the same thing for close friends. In some ways we're limited. We live in a small community. I know here in Temple, I feel like there's 1.5 degrees of separation. So it's pretty impossible, I feel like, for me to serve on a board without serving with some of my close friends. But to the extent that you can, get beyond your network. There are people who have tremendous skill sets and you just don't know them yet. Okay. So let's say you recruit your board, you've done all that, you've looked at their skills, you found the right people, you've told them what the expectations are, they've signed the agreement. What are we going to do at our first board meeting? We're going to get to know each other. We're going to orient those board members to the mission and the programs of the organization. And most importantly, we are going to formalize our governance. So that means that we've drafted these bylaws. The board is now going to vote to adopt the bylaws and any essential policies, particularly conflict of interest and financial management. Conflict of interest we've talked about. Financial management is a policy that would define, and you can put some of this in your bylaws too, but that's going to define things like who has access to checking accounts, how many signatures are needed, what spending limits, if any, different positions have. So we can get a little bit more into that in the governance session, but the point is that you do want to have some policies that protect you financially from risk. And you might want to adopt those at your very first board meeting. And you want to elect your officers at your first board meeting. The state of Texas requires you to have 3 officers. We generally recommend 4, which is president, vice president, or chair, whatever term you're using. They're interchangeable. Treasurer and secretary. Secretary is super important because you have to keep accurate minutes of your meetings. That is a required governing. It's a document that is a legal document, those minutes from your meetings. So you have to have a good secretary. You have to have a treasurer that's going to be the chief person responsible for financial obligations. And then obviously your president and vice president. You want to clarify at your first meeting, board member roles and responsibilities. And you want the board and this to authorize and have this in the minutes, the tax exemption filing. It's also great if you're ready to do so to go ahead and authorize opening a bank account. Um, and then you want to do some logistical stuff like what's our meeting schedule, what's our structure, what procedures are we going to have, and kind of establish that early. If you've already started your organization and you've already held your first board meeting and it didn't go like this, don't worry. All is not lost. We're just gonna there are things that can be corrected, and it's not about going back and trying to do things right the first time. This is, again, in an ideal world, this is the process you would follow. But we all know that we don't live in an ideal world. Okay, so once you've had that first board meeting, you are going to focus on the paperwork side. Now, the first two things you can do before you've held this board meeting, and before you've drafted bylaws. You can file your certificate of formation. That's a Form 202 with the Texas Secretary of State. There's a few things you need to include on it: your name, who your initial directors are. Again, in the state of Texas, you only have to have 3, but it's best if you wait until you have your full board of directors to do this. Your purpose clause, which is just basically saying this is what our organization exists to do. The dissolution clause that we've talked about. And then you just say, yep, my organization is a nonprofit, $25, and you are officially a nonprofit per the state of Texas. That doesn't make you tax exempt yet, but the state of Texas is recognizing you as a nonprofit. Next, you're going to obtain your employer identification number, or EIN, with the IRS. Every organization is required to have an EIN, whether or not they actually have employees. It's basically just saying this is your federal tax number. It's a substitute for your Social Security number. It's a business equivalent of your Social Security number. It's completely free to obtain an employer identification number, and you can do it immediately. Once you file the paperwork, IRS comes back, here's your EIN. The piece that you need to wait for and authorize at that first meeting is the filing with the IRS for federal tax exempt status. That's your 501c3, and you'll fill out a Form 1023 with the IRS. In order to do that, you're going to need bylaws, your certificate of formation, which you got from the state. In other states, this is called the Articles of Incorporation, but in Texas, we call it the Certificate of Formation. Description of activities, what you're going to do, what your programs are, what your financial projections are, and you have to include your conflict of interest policy. Note, this process could take a few weeks. It may even take months. So again, I would recommend having that vote and those board approved bylaws before you file for tax exempt status. You can start operating as a nonprofit even before you've received tax exempt status. It's going to take a little bit, and that's okay. You can start running your programs. The donations that you receive, you may want to wait to receive those donations until you've actually received your tax exempt status, but you can start operating before then. And then you'll apply for your state tax exemption with the Texas Comptroller. Clearly, in the state of Texas, we don't have income tax, but we do have sales tax, and you can get a sales tax exemption for your nonprofit, which, especially if you have a lot of like tangible needs, tools, equipment, is going to be a big deal. And then you want to build your organizational infrastructure, right? So you're incorporated, you've got your documents. What do we need to do now? We need to open a business bank account. We need to create accounting and financial management systems. They're probably going to be pretty simple at first. They might be spreadsheets, but maybe somebody on your board, is a whiz at QuickBooks, or maybe you have another financial management system you want to use, but you want to put something in place that's going to allow you to keep track of your income and expenditures. You want to develop additional policies and operating practices beyond what was required for your 501c3 submission. Just things that help establish the organization. Maybe you want to have a whistleblower policy that's recommended. There might be policies around gift acceptance that you didn't have to file with the IRS, but that you want to have on that your nonprofit wants to implement. You want to secure insurance and understand your legal requirements. So for most organizations, you are going to want to have at least general liability insurance and what's called directors and officers insurance, which basically keeps anybody with a legal complaint from going after your board of directors and being held personally financially liable for anything on behalf of the organization. And you want to establish your communications channels and protocol. How are you going to be communicating internally, externally? What do we need? We need email systems. Everybody needs an email address. We have social media. What communications channels are we using? We're going to use a newsletter, etc. So you're building all these things. You can do this honestly. You're building your things while you're sort of launching your programs. Those can occur simultaneously. This is just more so the behind the scenes work that needs to be done. And then finally, you need to fund your programs. You're up and running now. You've launched, you got your programs going. So how are you going to fund them? There are several types of revenue that most nonprofits have. Foundation grants, corporate grants, government grants. You can do event-based fundraising. Maybe you make a ton of money through a big event. Word of caution on event-based fundraising. A lot of times they do not bring in the income that matches the energy or the expenses you're putting into it. So be careful with event-based fundraising, especially before you're well established. Individual giving. Now, this is the lifeblood of every organization. You can see in this chart, this is from Giving USA, that 66% of the contributions to nonprofits last year came from individuals. That includes churches, just so you know, so that is a little bit skewed. It's not just to 501c3s. This includes that bigger pie chart with all of the charitable uses, the churches and the PTOs, et cetera, right? Bequests, again, you're probably not going to be starting with bequests if you're a brand new organization, but being able to have, people who want to give to your organization when they die. Earned income and fee for service. Maybe your organization offers a program, you require a small fee for participation, or maybe you offer a service, or you're having, like, for example, you're putting on a concert and bringing in income that way. So you might have some earned income, and then membership dues. If you're a membership organization, you might require members to pay dues. So those are the primary sources of revenue that we see from nonprofits. But in the first year, you really want to focus on your fundamentals. You want to ensure that infrastructure exists to support fundraising. You want to have a strong social media presence. You want to make sure you have online donation capability where people can set up recurring gifts. You want to make sure you have systems in place to track your donors, how much they've given, when they gave, if they're giving monthly. And you want to make sure that you have strong visibility and branding to support that fundraising. You want to create a fund development plan that has goals and strategies. Again, this does not have to be, cover everything A to Z, but understand, hey, we want to raise in our first year, whatever it is, $5,000, and this is how we're going to do it. These are the types of people we're going to approach. We already have a plan for this. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we want to bring in. Focus on individual giving. As I said, this is the lifeblood of any organization. Individual giving is unrestricted. It's the largest source of unrestricted funds. Grants typically come with a lot of strings. You can only use them for the program that you wrote the grant for. But individual giving can be used for anything. It can even be used for salaries, for overhead, whatever you need. So Focus on individual giving, build and steward a list of donors, meaning identify your potential donors, reach out to them, and once they're giving, make sure you are communicating well with them. Thank you letters, acknowledgments, newsletters. Make sure you're showing your appreciation for them and letting them see your impact. You want to report on what your impact has been so that they know their money is being well used. In the first year, you also want to ensure 100% board giving. Make sure every board member is personally making a meaningful financial contribution to the organization. And you want to become grant ready, basically meaning have practices and policies that are required by most funders. Again, they're going to want to see that you have strong financial practices. You're probably going to want to see that you file the Form 990. Again, I'll keep Rock Rose out of this because they are a little bit different than most funders, but most funders are going to want to see that you have an existing base of donors and support, and that you have policies and practices in place to support that. And they're going to want to see that your programs have already had some impact. So really use that first year, maybe 2 years, to focus on becoming grant ready. That's not to say that small organizations might not give you a grant here and there, but to really be able to go after those larger funders, you're going to need a little more history. And then lastly, you want to maintain compliance. You have to file your Form 990 annually. This is just the income tax return for nonprofits. This is open. It says open to public inspection. Anybody can request these, and it's good practice to have your Form 990 on your website, actually, that folks can just go, anybody can go and look at it. It's very transparent, and transparency is very, very important in the nonprofit sector. You want to make sure that you're maintaining corporate records. That's your minutes, your policies, so your board records count as, or your board minutes count as records. Your corporate, your formation document, certification of formation. You want to follow your bylaws and governance practices, and you want to make sure you're renewing any licenses or permits that are required for your specific nonprofit. So by doing all of that, you're maintaining compliance, you've built the ship, you have the governance, and now you're sailing it. Within compliance, you want to make sure that your accounting records, you're keeping good records of your accounting, meeting generally accepted accounting principles, that you're keeping a record of those who have donated, that you have those corporate records, and that you have records of activity. This is what we've been doing as an organization. We have some impact dashboards. We can tell you the story of our work, right? These are important records for the IRS, for your own organization, just keeping everything above board and maintaining compliance. So lastly, this is my last slide here. We've talked a lot about what I would call the back of house, right? I was all through college and grad school, I was in the service industry. So I think in terms of back of the house and front of the house. And this is really the back of the house. This is making sure that everything is in order, that you have the infrastructure to actually deliver the programs and make the impact that you want to have in your community, the reason that you exist, the mission that you connect to. There's a lot of stuff you have to do in the background to make sure that your organization is in the best position to fulfill that mission. But in order to be successful, you want to maintain focus on that purpose and avoid mission creep. Meaning that sometimes when you're delivering your programs, you'll identify another gap, but that gap doesn't relate to your original mission. You can refer, you can partner, but avoid the tendency to take on new programs that are going to take you away from your mission. That's a key to nonprofit success. Maintaining a strong focus on good governance, and a lot of this has been about building that infrastructure to have good governance. And You want to build strong partnerships and deliver impactful programs, because what good is building all this infrastructure, right, if you're not able to deliver on those programs? Your goal is to serve the community. Your purpose is to end hunger or homelessness or promote literacy, whatever it is. Cultivate and steward donors and funders. You want to make sure that you are out there all the time selling your programs, thanking your donors, thanking your funders. Without that, you're not going to have those repeat funders, the recurring donations, the major gifts. You want to communicate your impact well and often. That means, through your newsletter, through social media, but it also means developing good relationships with the media, who will feature you in articles. And lastly, you want to plan and scale effectively. Do things with intention. Plan for your next steps, for where you want to go, what programs you want to add, what staff you want to add, and add those when you're ready. If you grow too fast, you run the risk of not fully building the infrastructure that you need to get where you want to be. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you so much for all of that information, Emily. If you do have a question that you'd like to ask right now, please just feel free to unmute yourself or put a hand up. And just a reminder for everybody, we are recording this. So if you missed any part of it or you want to go back and review something, you can always review the recording on our website. Yes, I see a hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Jasmine. Thank you so much for the information. I've been working with Emily for a while, but I had a question. And thank you, Solange, for the invite. The bank account. So I know you said for the first board meeting to talk about authorized opening a bank account. So I've had my bank account for a while. Is that something that would be okay? Or would I need to have a different account to transition to? How does that work?
You can keep your account open, Jasmine. I think you would then use your first board meeting or when you first start getting together with your board of directors to work out your financial management policies, decide who's a signer on that account. If you want two signatures, who's going to take checks versus who's going to deposit checks, just something that makes sure, especially when you're with a working board, you need to really have those distinctions to avoid any perceived conflict of interest. So I would keep your account open, decide who you want to be a signer on that account, and build your financial management policies accordingly.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
You're
Great
welcome.
question. Thank you, Jasmine. I saw another hand up and then it went away. Did we?
Yes, that was me. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Emily did a fantastic job. So as I was processing everything, I'm like, oh yeah, she already answered that. So I don't need the answer.
Understood. Thank you, Christina. Any other questions?
I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead, Jasmine.
Insurance is something I had not thought about at all as far as like the general liability insurance. What do I look for when I'm searching for a company to provide insurance?
That's a good question and one that I don't know the answer to right off the bat. I would probably stick with getting a few quotes from different insurance agencies, people that you trust, ask around, maybe see who other nonprofits are using as their insurer, and go from there. I can probably do a little bit of work and ask Kelsey or Solange to pass this on to the full group around, like, maybe there's probably some good articles, and I know you can all Google it, right? But on what to look for in nonprofit insurance. And I'd be happy to do a little more looking into that and share that with the group.
Great. Ms. D, go ahead.
Okay, it's a question about the insurance as well. So, is it recommended just from start out of your program to get the insurance, even though you really haven't built your board or have a lot of financing yet for your program? Or is it after a certain like, I don't know, after you are making
Mhm.
or getting funded, like, $2,000 or more, or is there
Mhm.
something that or is there a step? I guess my question is there a point at which we definitely need to have the insurance for? Because of course the insurance will come with the cost. So if you
Yes.
are not really making the money yet to be able to support the
Can I
price of the insurance.
Right.
can I
Right.
say
Yeah, I
something right
know. And
quick?
it's kind of like a chicken or egg, right? Because if you don't have the insurance and something happens, you're going to be in a bigger financial bind. So I think there's no one size fits all. I think that's part of why you want to do the business planning process, right? So that when you go into it, you've already identified, hey, these are the expenses. This is what I need to take care of. This is what I need to account for. And this is how much money I think we're going to need to operate the organization. If your programs are not active yet, you're not serving clients yet, your risks are low, right? So not having insurance at that time, I'm never going to sit here and say you don't have to have insurance. Like, I feel like that would be irresponsible of me, but I will say your risks of running into any issues are extremely low. Once you start working with clients, your risk increase tremendously, especially if those clients are minors, special needs, any protected populations. Like, you really want to make sure that your insurance is going to cover those people who have given their volunteer hours and time across the board. So again, don't have programs, probably okay. Once you're implementing programs, probably want to bite the bullet and get the insurance, and maybe you can find somebody to sponsor that insurance, whether it's a board member or a friend or somebody who believes in your mission.
I heard Christina had something she wanted to add to that.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I kind of texted in the thing because I was one of those people who didn't think about insurance either until I had to reserve a space to have one of my events, and it was like, okay, you have insurance, and I was like, oh, okay, so I need that. And so I Next Insurance, I put it there. It's affordable, and it does cover like that. I guess that $1 million cap or whatever they have or whatever. So that is a good insurance to start off with. It is really, really affordable. I will say, really, because especially for us who don't have any money. So it's super affordable. You can look into Next Insurance. But when it came to the directors, insuring the directors, that's a whole nother space that I got to look for, because not every insurance covers that. So it's specific insurances that do the director. So that's
Mhm.
what Emily, if you guys want to look at that, that would be helpful to me too, because we've been kind of looking to for the
Right.
director portion, but just the general liability insurance, Next Insurance is really, really affordable. I mean, like less than $50 is affordable a month. So that's something that I just wanted to share.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Great questions. And thank you for adding in what you've learned yourself,
Yeah.
Christina. Anything else? Any other questions?
I have another question.
Yes, go for it.
So eventually I want to be able to also give out scholarships, because I am a female-based organization. So being able to give out scholarships to females, is that something that I need to incorporate into my bylaws, or how would I be able to do that?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's programmatic in nature, and your bylaws are more of a governing document. There might be components of the operations of the scholarship program that need to be defined in your bylaws. If you have some language around like risk and financial management, there could be new language that you want to add once you are engaged in scholarships. But you shouldn't have to include any new programming in your bylaws. You probably do want to, at that point, if you don't already have it, develop very strong financial management policies and gift acceptance policies. There's a lot that can be done around scholarships. I'm on the board of Temple Education Foundation, and they provide teacher grants and student scholarships, and that's it. But a lot of opportunity for funders who want to support those scholarships as well. So good luck with that, Jasmine. That sounds like a worthy cause.
Are there some specific IRS requirements too if you are providing scholarships? I'm asking because I know there are for us, but like you said at the beginning, foundation rules are sometimes different than non-foundation rules within that 501c3. So do non-foundation 501c3s need to worry about that?
I do not know, Solange, but that's something I can look into as well. Whether public charities, as we're defined, whether a public charity has specific IRS requirements around scholarships. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I love the questions. I'm so glad that you were all here with us. Thank you so much, Emily, for providing so much in-depth information. Again, we will have that recording up on our website if you want to go back and look at it. I did drop a link. And on our website, you can find the recording that she mentioned from last year about strategic planning. And we hope that some of you will join us, or all of you will join us, invite some friends to come to the office hours and our board building governance? I should
Board
know
governance
this. The next one.
essentials.
I always have to look up the details.
For that office hours, you don't need to register. Just pop on in if you have time, if you have questions. It sounds like, you might, after you sit with this presentation for a bit, you might have some more. So,
yeah, absolutely. And of course, Rock Rose Foundation, we are here. Kelsey is here. I'm here to, answer questions too. Or at least try to find who you should be talking to if we don't know the answers to questions. So anything else, Emily, that you want to say before we wrap up?
No, just I look forward to hearing everybody's questions in the upcoming office hours, and it's been great. Thank you all for your attention, and I hope that it's been really helpful.
And thank you all for all of the things that you're doing in the community. You're here for a reason, whether it's something that you've already started doing, whether it's something that you're thinking about doing, you're here because you have a heart for the community. And we appreciate that very much. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay warm and dry.
Thanks, everybody.
thank you.
Y'all take care.